morning, Kieran. How are you?
Hey Peter, I'm not too bad. Just getting myself all set up for the Monday Madness and the week ahead.
Good man, good man. Well, Kieran, welcome to the NI Business Podcast. Thanks very much for sharing your busy Monday morning with me. Could we start? Could you tell me a little, Kieran, about yourself, your background, and your business, please?
Yeah, so I first and foremost, Peter, I have to tell everyone I'm a registered nurse. That is my starting point in everything in life, both in terms of my personal life and my professional life. I've been a registered nurse for 17 years. And that has, led me up to where I am currently. Having worked in the NHS and the private sector and the voluntary and charity sector, and now I am where I am now. So my role currently is I'm the managing director and the sole owner of the Balmoral Group, and basically what that consists of is we have two businesses. We have Balmoral Healthcare, which is our nursing agency that's been in existence for 25 years. And we also have then in the past year, we've opened Balmoral Home Care, which is a domiciliary care agency with providing care into people's own homes. Obviously, Balmoral Healthcare, I haven't been the owner for 25 years. I came into the business 6 years ago. And then 3 years ago, I then bought it off the previous owner. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. And as I said at the start, I am first and foremost a registered nurse because it feeds into everything that I do. Even though I am now a business owner, my values, principles, and the founding of me as a nurse, I take right into the business world and being a business owner.
And it's an interesting transition, as you say, from being a qualified registered nurse, that it's obviously you're really proud of that. So how did you do that transition? What was the spark that made you transition to business?
Um, there really wasn't a spark. I was very happily working, Peter, in the health service. I was working as a healthcare inspector, and I seen that's where my career was going to be and stay, and I'd happily retire out of that. And then the previous owner of Balmoral contacted me and said, I would like you to come work for me. And I said no 6 times. And it was about the seventh meeting, then I reneged and I says, okay, I'll come work for you. So I come in then initially as a director. And I had never worked in a pure business role. Now, I've had managerial roles in healthcare,
Mhm.
which, there are business elements to your role and business responsibilities in terms of people management, financial management, governance, compliance, all that sort of thing. So I think what I had learned in my management roles in healthcare, they were transferable into this new role, and also because this is a healthcare business, it was kind of a nice fit. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a lot to learn. The whole financial world of now being a responsible business person. I'd never operated at the level that I'm now operating now in terms of that responsibility. So there was a steep learning curve in terms of different components of the business. But I would say a lot of my experience in terms of dealing with people, managing people, dealing with the public, agreeing contracts, a lot of it was very much transferable skills, and even if when I go right back to when I worked as a staff nurse, which is a very clinical role in the caring for patients,
Mhm.
um, I very much find that my experience from then is instrumental to my role now because even though I'm not directly hands-on caring for people myself anymore, I have a kind of corporate responsibility for still making sure that people are safe, well looked after, and provided with good care. And and that's because we have so many clients out there in the sector that we are providing staff out to support. So it's kind of just an evolvement of previous roles and previous employment. And like I said, the founding and the most important thing for me is absolutely the thing about values and principles. Whether I'm sitting at a patient's bedside as a nurse caring for them, or I'm sitting at the head of a board table, my values and principles have never changed. And that
Mhm.
has been, I believe, critical to my personal success, but also the success of the business.
Yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about target market, Kieran, for the Balmoral Group. So who do you enjoy working with the most and who benefits most from engaging with the Balmoral Group?
In recent years, Peter, we've seen a real increase in demand from people living in their own home, and people who in their own home who are requiring the care of either a registered nurse or people who don't quite need nursing care at the minute, and their needs can be met from a carer. Those groups of folks we have definitely seen a growing market and demand from. And I have to say, those are the people who I see as probably the most vulnerable, because other people who are maybe in a care home or in a hospital or in hospice or wherever it may be, there's already a group structure around delivering those people's care. And maybe we're just coming in to supplement it or coming in an emergency or when somebody's off on long-term sick or maternity or whatever.
Mhm.
Whereas people who are in their own home, they tend to have either nothing or no one. Now, they might have some family members, but they're really trying to muddle their way through a system that
Mhm.
is very complicated, very confusing, and very overwhelming, especially for somebody who's maybe elderly, maybe somebody who has a cognitive impairment, like a dementia or whatever. This is a whole different world from when you are a fully independent person, not
Mhm.
reliant on any sort of care from other people. So those are the group that, I'm particularly finding an interest in working with at the minute, because there's an individual there and all with completely fascinating stories and life stories, and it's a privilege to be able to get in and hear that and learn about, we provide care in people's home for some really amazing, fascinating people that I could just sit and talk to all day. Um, and that we have the privilege that they've came to us and says, "Can you help me to either look after myself or to look after my mummy or daddy or whoever it may be?"
Yeah, it's a fascinating world, and I guess it's maybe something that people wouldn't naturally straight away associate healthcare with, that the home type service. So
Yeah,
if you think about your time as a business owner, Kieran, what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned along the way?
it's something I've alluded to at the start, Peter, is never is so my biggest lesson and one of the biggest pieces of advice that I would give to anyone. I do a bit of teaching in Queen's University to undergraduate nursing and midwifery students. And I what I'm about to say to you, I say the same to them. Never negotiate on your personal values and principles, ever. And I firmly believe that that has always been my guiding mantra. That, if you really, really stick true to what your personal values are, which I believe have been instilled from me from a child. My mother was a single parent with three kids. We lived in what would have been deemed as a socially deprived area. Um, Therefore, going by statistics, I really shouldn't be where I am, Peter, but what has been instilled for me from the likes of my mother, I think has been the absolute biggest lesson and biggest asset to me. And I think if anyone, and it doesn't matter what role you're operating at or what level, if you stay true to your own personal values and your own personal principles, there may be some difficult decisions you have to make and some things that you have to say no to. But you know what? I think you'll be on the best track for a success in life in terms of satisfaction in your professional life, but more importantly, in your personal life and in your own well-being also.
Yeah, it's such a great share for anyone listening to this. Values in a business, enable you to make better decisions. So yeah, it's such a great chair, and it's definitely in the minority of businesses that have got that to go to. So, and you can do it for free, which is it's an interesting uh, dilemma.
Yeah, and the thing is, Peter, and I really don't mean to sound cliche or cheesy or corny, but I firmly believe, and not even I believe it, I have the evidence to prove it. What you give out, you absolutely do get back. So if you are, someone of a different mentality where you see people, particularly as solely transactional, and you see important things in life as solely transactional with no meaning, no purpose, no value, and you have no genuine care towards, I would say that you're going to be faced with some really difficult times in your life. And it's not to say that my life by no means is always rosy and perfect and it's all happy clappy and whatever. Of course there are challenges, but I can't stress enough, and when I look around the business world and even the healthcare world, I see some people who are making some very distasteful decisions, doing some really wrongs by people. And, you know, I I don't wish them any ill. I just hope that in someday those people will actually see a bit of sense and go, do you know what, actually, I have been wrong, I have done wrong. And, it's only through life experience and learning that hopefully people can have eventually a bit of insight to go, I think maybe I could have did this differently. And unfortunately, I've made enemies along the way. I've did horrible things along the way, whatever. But sometimes hindsight and insight are a wonderful thing, and it maybe takes that for people to have a bit of a look at themselves in the mirror.
And what about yourself? If you speaking of the mirror, if you look in the mirror, what do you feel that you've learned most about yourself along your business journey?
Um, I think for me, probably the biggest thing is about consistency. I do believe that, you know, if you're not consistent in terms of the service that you deliver and the things that you say that you are going to do, eventually the mask starts to slip. And I do believe that consistency is critical to success. I think consistency on a personal level, in terms of stuff that I do, both, within Balmoral, but also outside of Balmoral, because I'm involved in a number of other things. And that belief for me, I try to emulate within the company so that people can see that there is a consistency, a reliability, and a solidness with our business and our organization. And I think because of that, what we have seen is reputational success. And what I'm always minded of, over 25 years, we have built up within the sector and further afield an absolutely amazing reputation. But as you and I both know, that could go in the blink of an eye. And I think if you start to wave on your consistency and I suppose pulling back in values, beliefs, principles, all that, you very quickly start to lose that reputation of that you have built up over all those years.
And who or what has shaped you and influenced you the most along the way, Kieran?
Um, well, I was really thinking about this, and within the business world, Peter, there's actually purely within business world, there's nobody per se that comes to mind. However, within my professional world and the healthcare world, there have been quite a few key people who have come into my life and have stayed in my life um, along the way. To mention a few, or two again, women actually who have been really influential upon me, and they are both nurses. One of them is a lady called Professor Charlotte McCardle. Charlotte used to be the Chief Nursing Officer for Northern Ireland, and has been an absolutely amazing guidance, support, and listening ear for me. And then the second person that I have found really inspirational and influential is Professor Pat Cullen. Pat was up until recently the chief executive and general secretary for the Royal College of Nursing. She's from Northern Ireland, and I have found both those women to be hugely influential. And I think not just because they're nurses, but also when I look at them and I see that the success that they have made of themselves, where they have went into these very strategic corporate roles, but in those roles, I believe, and I've seen they carried through the principles and mantra of our profession, that being nurses. So those two for me, have definitely been my biggest influences. There's other people out there in the business world who I look at and I go, do you know what? What they're doing is class. I really see that one of them is probably, I think, a mutual friend of yours and mine, Aileen Dugan from Keenan Recruitment. Aileen is inspirational in her own way. Aileen has become a great friend of mine. And again, another person who I see is just genuine, down to earth, doesn't negotiate on our values and principles, and is just somebody who I know that I could trust implicitly. She's not a nurse, which in some ways is great, but is somebody that I know if I needed to, I could go and pick her brains. So I think interestingly, all women, and I think it's great.
Very good, good sharing. Yeah, 18's great. 18's great. So look, what gets you out of bed in the morning and drives your passion for business?
Well, I think I'll split that. The thing that gets me out of bed, is my daughter. She's 4 and she absolutely gets us out of bed bright and early and uh, fresh-eyed and bushy-tailed. Um, but in terms of getting me out of bed for business and driving the passion is no 2 days are the same, Peter, in my world. Like it goes from one extreme to the other. It's totally fascinating. You never know what's going to come in left field or right field. And I love the buzz of that. I love of not knowing what today is going to be like. I love the fact that it can be very reactive, very spontaneous. You can be, I'll be sitting in the likes of this with you, and I could come out of this and have to be dealing, advising, guiding, and directing my team on a really, really challenging and difficult situation that's involving somebody's care, somebody's life. Um, so I think that's what gives me the buzz to get up and go. The variety of work that we do, we have about 300 people that work for our organization within the Balmoral Group. Um, and we have people all over the whole country working in all different settings. And it's that variety of, the whole array of things that come through your door. And a lot of the stuff is absolutely fascinating and really interesting insight into the kind of people's lives in this country. And if you're a wee bit naturally inquisitive like me, you'll love hearing about that and you'll love hearing about the different things that are going on right on our doorstep. So I think that's really what my buzz is in terms of the passion for this business.
And look, in the unlikely event that you were on a desert island and you could read a book or listen to a podcast or whatever, what would you pick?
Never. That's what it's called. Never.
Oh, I was going to say.
So yeah. It's a book called Never by Ken Follett. You have to read it, Peter, honest to God. One of my team here in the office recommended it to me, and she gave me her copy of it, and I was going to Croatia on holiday, and I took it with me, and I had all 832 pages read in 4 days. I just couldn't put it down. I'm not going to tell you what it's about. Ken Follett is he's very well known writer and author and that and book publisher, and the book, oh, it's class. So yeah. So that's definitely would be my, and I've read it twice back to back, and I would have no issue reading it again on a desert island.
Good man, great share. And what's the biggest challenge that you're currently facing in your business at the minute?
If I'm being honest and straight up with you, Peter, it is we are working in a market that has two great issues. It is a completely saturated market. So we have huge competition. We have a lot of similar businesses to ours that, particularly in the past 5 years, has nearly quadrupled.
Mm.
And what compounds that is working in a saturated market with so many competitors is, and this is no secret, healthcare, there is a workforce shortage.
Mm.
So we are all competing out of the same pool for whether it be for nurses, carers, we're all trying to compete for the same kind of type of worker, type of person, skill set. So those two things are definitely our biggest challenge. Out of those challenges, the first one were in terms of, competition in a saturated market. And I'll knock it on my soapbox, but the what really grinds me is then the cowboys out there that are in that saturated market. And, we know our compliance, we know how we adhere to best practice, legislative requirements, regulatory requirements. And then you hear about this, buck agent down the road who's doing all sorts of dodgy dealings. And I'm like, one, that's just annoyed me, but two, it just gets our sector a bad name because we're not all like that. And you have organizations that do operate properly. They provide exceptionally high standards of workforce and people. And then you have somebody like this who's just, ruining it for everyone. But going back to another these are all old sayings my granny used to have. Long run's a fox, Peter. And I do believe, again, not to be cliche, corny, or cheesy, but long run's a fox. If you're operating in that way, it'll not last forever. It'll not.
And let's go off piste, Kieran. So if you could invite any three people, alive or dead, to a dinner party, who would you invite?
Um, I would, I'd love, okay. So there's people related to me who are no longer here that I've never met that I'd love to invite. So one of my grandfathers, I never met. He died long before I was even anywhere near this world. And from what I've heard of him and what a family and that have been able to, I would love to meet that man. I would find his life story to be absolutely fascinating. He had a hell of a lot of health issues, died very young. He was only about 34, and left my grandmother with six daughters, and had a lot of health issues prior to that. I'd love to meet that man. I'd love to hear what his life journey was like. Apparently had a very difficult childhood and then for to die so early. I'd also then to go to another complete extreme. I'd love to meet Winston Churchill. I would love to hear all about the ins and outs of the war, about how he kind of, was in the thick of that in central London at the time and what it was like and dealing with all these, the pressure that that man must have been under, in terms of trying to run the country at a time where it was at war. I think it would just be fascinating to sit down with him over. I don't think what well, he used to drink a short and like this cigar, and you'd be sitting for days listening to him. So I think really those probably would be two that would be an absolute winner for me if I could get them around the table. And I think I would leave it at that because there would be enough there to talk about that you could be there for weeks or days. And like I say, one's a very personal connection, and the other I just think would be fascinating to hear what his experience and life experience was, and hearing about the minutiae of dealing with government and politics and war and all the kind of the hidden information about what
Yeah.
it went on at that time.
And what if you could go back in time, Kieran, and not back to when Winston Churchill was Prime Minister? If you could go back and give some advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that sound like?
Um, I think I'd repeat a lot of what I said here, and a lot of what I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't tell my 18-year-old self a lot of what I am telling 18-year-olds in Queens at the minute who've just came straight from A levels in to do nursing and midwifery. And it is that bit about um the values, the principles, be true to yourself. And at the same time as well, Peter, there for me, I've taken a lot of risks in my career, particularly my early career. And when I reflect on it now, I kind of sum it up in a way that, and I convey this to the students that I teach, essentially never stay anywhere that you're unhappy. So if
Mm.
you're working in a place or for someone that you absolutely hate, why are you staying? Nobody should be staying anywhere where they are unhappy, where it's impacting their physical health, their mental health, their emotional well-being. Change is okay, and it's okay to hop around a bit if that's what you need to do to find what's right for you, because you only get one shot at this. And why would you stay anywhere where you're trying to please somebody else? And why would you do all that? Because you're being true to your values and principles. You're being true to yourself. And remember, not to sound selfish, but it is about you. You have to look after number one, but never, ever stay anywhere that you're unhappy or where you feel that you're not being treated in a way that you should be being treated. Period.
Great advice. What about let's look forward. So 5 years down the line, what does the Balmoral Group look like then?
I think we have been on a journey already over the past 6 years that I've been here in of digital transformation.
Mm.
I definitely see, Peter, that digital transformation is going to continue. I think in terms of how we continue to evolve and digitalize our whole operations, I do think that AI is going to be a big role in the digitalization of our organization in terms of how we interact and engage with our workers that are all remote. Remember, these folks are all out there in the field. I think AI is going to feed into that. We're going to be plugging that in back in. There's further growth on the horizon. I would like our headquarters and our sole office is in Belfast. I
Mm.
definitely feel that we're starting to get to a pinch point of needing a presence up in the northwest. So that's something that's sitting there in the front of my mind, going, right, maybe we need to start exploring that and how can we do that? We have coming that's going to keep us pretty busy. I suppose for me, Peter, looking forward to the next 5 years, I take each day as it comes. I'm very grateful for each day that I have. Um, and gratitude, I think, is critical as well to success. So in order for us to do all those things in the next 5 years, is me just being mindful of being grateful. There are going to be difficult days. Nothing's ever perfect, but you know what? You pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and better days. Bad things do happen. Somebody did tell me before, bad things do happen, but you know what? They're a lot less than the good things when you really put them into perspective. So there will be difficult days. There's going to be days I don't have much hair left, but there's going to be days that if I had hair, I'd be pulling it out. But I firmly believe that, things come good again. And if you have the resilience to stick in there, and most importantly for me, is I've an amazing team around me, both in work and at home. I have absolutely fantastic support, and I have two groups of people at home and in work that I trust implicitly. I feel that they've got my back. I feel that I'm respected by them and that I respect them.
Mm.
And that's what gets you through the difficult times, because there will be. But it's very much looking forward to some big positive changes and exciting times over the next 5 years.
And if someone likes what they've heard, Kieran, and would like to reach out or get in touch with you or the business, what's the best way for them to go about that?
Peter, I'm happy to share my personal email address. So people can either email me personally at Balmoral, Kieran.McCormack@balmoral.healthcare, or they can always phone into our office if it's not me that they're looking to speak to or something about our services that they're maybe wanting to inquire about. They can always phone our offices on 02890 380 808. And we'd always be happy to help. But similarly, if somebody wants to ring the office and they want to ring me, I'm not protected or locked. I have a very good secretary, Peter, but she does allow people through, and I do make myself available, and I'm more than happy, absolutely more than happy to have a chat with anyone, regardless whether it's about business, healthcare, nursing, or our services. Give me a shout. And I am also on LinkedIn and Twitter as well if people want to DM me.
Superb. Well, Kieran McCormack from Balmoral Group, thanks so much for sharing your story. I could chat all day with you, Kieran. It's been really cool listening, some fantastic shares there as well. So I wish you, can't really say Merry Christmas yet, but I saw it. Merry Christmas. Have a great
Merry Christmas.
and I wish you every success for the years to come, Kieran. Thanks very much.
Listen, Peter, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. It's nice to take a few minutes out just to reflect on a few things. And I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been a pleasure and absolutely painless. So it's been a lovely chat.